Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, another nation now says it will recognize a Palestinian state existing right beside Israel. But critics warn such a move could be a danger to the Jewish state. And American universities now reaching major settlements on lawsuits over its anti-Semitism on campuses. We're going to have analysis from the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. The U.S. and its allies sending a warning to China: don't test us. Those nations carrying out military exercises in the Pacific as China is making aggressive moves in the region. And the move of God that's been crossing America is also reaching inside prisons. We're going to bring you a look at a salvation service behind bars. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, the 31st of July. Going to begin this half hour with the latest country to say it will recognize a Palestinian state, Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister saying they support such a state existing side by side with Israel in peace and security. But critics are firing back, claiming the creation of a Palestinian state would simply be a reward for Hamas's terrorism. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell brings us the story, reporting from Jerusalem.
Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made the announcement after a cabinet meeting.
Canada has long been committed to a two-state solution. An independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security.
Carney said Canada wants the Palestinian Authority to lead the state, but only if it implements needed reforms,
including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Canada's decision follows a similar announcement by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. CBN's Raj Nair talked with Revelation TV's Simon Barrett, who says that the Palestinian Authority's goal is not to live side by side in peace with Israel.
Effectively, what they want is a state as a means to destroying the state of Israel. This is part of the intentions belonging to Fatah, which is the leading faction of the PLO that run the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. It's the same goals as Hamas in their covenant charter they wrote in 1987, calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and also Jews around the world.
Barrett says these announcements send a message to Hamas.
What message is this sending Hamas? This is sending a Hamas they don't need to negotiate. They don't need to release the hostages. And if they continue their violence and terrorism against Israel, then they will be rewarded with stateship.
Meanwhile, President Trump said Canada's decision threatens ongoing trade negotiations. In a post, he said their support for a Palestinian state would make it very hard to make a trade deal. Also in Washington, the Senate rejected two resolutions by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders to block U.S. weapons sales to Israel. A majority of the Democrats voted in favor of those resolutions.
And our CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now to continue our coverage. So, Chris, how have Israel's foreign ministry and Hamas reacted to Canada's, the UK's, and France's declarations for a Palestinian state?
Well, Efrem, two opposite reactions. Hamas thanked France and the United Kingdom. In their statement, they said the international support for Palestinian self-determination shows we're moving in the right direction. And they added that victory and liberation are closer than we ever expected. That's after what France and the UK said. On the other hand, Israel's foreign ministry rejected the statement yesterday by Prime Minister Mark Carney. And it said in its statement that the change in the position of the Canadian government at this time is a reward for Hamas and that it harms the efforts to achieve both a ceasefire in Gaza and a framework for the release of the hostages. The question many are asking is, who do you really want applauding your decision? Would it be Israel or Hamas?
Chris, is this being seen as a way to pressure Israel to end the war against Hamas in Gaza before Israel believes the job is finished?
Well, for many here in Israel, they do believe that it's seen that way. Starmer, he set conditions for Israel to meet First of all, they would have to have a ceasefire. They would have full access to UN humanitarian aid into Gaza. They would halt annexation of Judea and Samaria, and they would commit to a two-state solution. So every one of those conditions that Starmer set can be problematic to Israel. First of all, a ceasefire may undermine its goal to defeat Hamas militarily. Also, Israel says the UN is complicit with Hamas in undermining aid distribution, and it undermines the other aid groups in Gaza, which is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We've talked a lot about those over the weeks. And most Israelis don't want a two-state solution after October 7th. So all of these conditions believe here in Israel aid Hamas, and they point a diplomatic gun at Israel. Netanyahu, on the other hand, argues those conditions reward Hamas's what he calls monstrous terrorism, and he warned that a jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain tomorrow.
Israel has reportedly warned Hamas it will annex parts of Gaza if there's no hostage deal. How would that work, and what would that mean?
Well, first of all, the Knesset may have to declare sovereignty or apply Israeli law like it did to Jerusalem years ago, as well as the Golan Heights. They may have to install a military-civilian administration and then take over permanent control of key areas in Gaza. That may include the Netzarim corridor. That's a strip of land that goes east to west across central Israel, and also the Philadelphia corridor. That's a very strategic area right on the Egyptian-Gaza border. For Hamas, if annexing land there would be a major military defeat, and also in Islamic terms, it would mean losing land that's once under Muslim control, and then control that would go, in their minds, back to the infidels. It's not government policy yet, but some leaders, Israeli leaders, really want complete annexation of the Gaza Strip after the war.
Now, Israel pulled out of Gaza 20 years ago. That would be 2005. How does the Israeli public feel about that now?
Well, there was a recent poll by Israel Hayom, that's called Israel Today. Many believe the disengagement, what it was called 20 years ago, a huge mistake. And they see a direct connection between the disengagement back in 2005 and October 7th. We were there, CBN News was there 20 years ago, and some warned then that the pullout of maybe 9,000 Jewish citizens there would create a terror haven inside Gaza, and it turns out they were right. And in this poll, a majority support renewing Jewish settlement inside Gaza, where once they were thriving communities. We were there to witness, many places that exported food and flowers, actually, to Europe. It was really tragic to see what they were, how they were destroyed, and then 20 years later, the aftermath, I should say about 18 years later, the aftermath of October 7th.
One final question for you. Does Israel have any idea how much longer the war against Hamas might last until it feels it has won?
Well, they would like to have it over as soon as possible. It's been such a toll here in Israel, the number of men and women that have been killed or wounded in the war. But Israel may see at a crossroads now. Will they succumb to this growing international pressure to declare Palestinian state and then go ahead and end the war? Or would they say, many people say, end the war prematurely, or will they press forward militarily and defeat Hamas? A telling statement the other day by Senator Lindsey Graham on Sunday. He said Israel may do what the Allies did to Germany and Japan during World War II and actually defeat them completely. That's why many say it's really important at this time to be praying for wisdom for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also U.S. President Donald Trump.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you as always for your insights. Look forward to checking back in with you again tomorrow. Here at home, universities are reaching major settlements and lawsuits over anti-Semitism on campus, and more on why a growing number of countries are talking about recognizing a Palestinian state. We're going to get insight and analysis on those issues when we come back. America's universities settled lawsuits over anti-Semitism in France and Britain and now Canada. are saying they are set to recognize a Palestinian state. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Jewish News Syndicate's editor-in-chief, Jonathan Tobin, contends one development is good for Americans and the other for Hamas. First, he explains the motivation behind the British and French decision on a Palestinian state.
I think it's in part a reaction to domestic politics in those countries where, the hard left and Islamists have formed this bizarre red-green alliance, and they're a real factor in those countries' political equations. And they're reacting also in part to this tsunami of propaganda about starvation in Gaza, which is created by Hamas. Not to say that there isn't suffering in Gaza, which of course there is, but it's of Hamas's creation. They have, there's no shortage of food, but the food isn't being distributed because Hamas hoards it, steals it, sells it back to people at exorbitant prices. That's what's driving the problem.
And there's been a Palestinian state there for 20 years. It's called Gaza, and this is the result of it.
The Hamas state in Gaza was an independent Palestinian state in all but name from 2005 to 2023. If it does, and we saw what happened. It was a terrorist state. It was only interested in conquering Israel, killing people. They had no interest in developing things for their own people.
So why do you think Hamas is continuing this fight, Jonathan, with both the EU and the Arab League now calling on them to surrender? Hamas must know that they're never going to be victorious and allowed to return to governing Gaza.
Well, they think they can win. They think they're going to win. That's why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, you can say it sounds illogical. They could never beat Israel, and that's true. But they have always calculated, even, on October 7th, when they achieved complete surprise, their calculations have always been based on the idea that the West will turn on Israel and that cut it off, isolate it, and ultimately hand it to them on a silver platter. That's what they're doing. They look at what's gone on in the streets of American and European cities with mobs chanting for Israel's destruction. They see these diplomatic efforts, with recognitions of a Palestinian state which is a reward for terrorism. And they say, look, we're winning. Yes, we couldn't beat the Israelis militarily, but we're beating them politically. And everyone who demands a ceasefire is just encouraging Hamas to hold on and to emerge, and because they believe a ceasefire will let them emerge triumphant from this war, that it will allow them to regain control of Gaza. They think that this is all in the cards for them. It doesn't have to be, and indeed, if Israel sticks to its guns, it won't be. But their ambitions are not unreasonable given the support they've been getting from the West. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Well, for now, it appears the IDF will press on until the hostages are released and Hamas is destroyed. So what do you see happening in the coming days as the second anniversary of the October 7th terrorist massacre approaches?
Well, the war is this is a very difficult situation. Prime Minister Netanyahu, don't envy his dilemma. The war is difficult. The foreign pressure is enormous. The pressure from inside Israel for people who want the hostages released. And, the war is exhausting. It's been a long, hard slog. So I think the war just continues, which is dreadful for the Palestinians in Gaza. It's dreadful for Israelis. But the choice is whether you're going to have that or let Hamas win. And Netanyahu knows he cannot let Hamas win, lest Israel be faced with future October 7th and more horror for both sides.
And finally, here domestically, we saw Columbia University agree to a $200 million settlement concerning the civil rights of Jews during pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus. Also, UCLA has settled a $6 million lawsuit with Jewish students. And now it looks like Harvard is reportedly preparing to agree to a settlement, maybe as much as $500 million because of its failure to protect its students from anti-Semitism. So 2 questions here. Do you think these settlements would have happened without President Trump's advocacy? And what's to prevent these universities from ignoring violations of Jewish student civil rights in the future?
Well, first, this wouldn't have happened without President Trump being reelected last November. Biden, another 4 years of the Democrats of Kamala Harris would have been the opposite. They were supporting these universities. These deals are not as ideal as his initial demands, but they're still tremendous progress. I mean, this is really the beginning of rolling back the reign of DEI and the woke domination and indoctrination in our education system. It's good for the Jews, for sure, because that's the Jews are the canaries in the coal mine here. This is good for all Americans. Now, how will it be in the future? Well, it's all a matter of enforcement. These deals are great. They're victories no matter what. This is something for Trump to be proud of. But it will be a matter of whether the United States government continues to monitor it, continues to enforce it.
Okay, Jonathan Tobin, JNS Editor-in-Chief. Thank you, Jonathan. We appreciate you sharing your time and insights.
Thank you.
Also on this week's Global Lane, a look at Donald Trump's frenzied political pace and achievements during the first 6 months of his second term, and the NEA's reinterpretation of history regarding Israel and the Holocaust in the union's 2025 teaching manual. You can see it all on the Global Lane this evening on the CBN News channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can watch it on YouTube. Still ahead, the U.S. and its allies sending a warning to China as military drills are underway in the Pacific, showing preparation in case of possible combat in the future. We're going to have the story for you right after this. China is making aggressive military moves in the Pacific, but America and its allies are sending a warning. Don't test us. CBN's George Thomas has the story.
Australia is hosting its largest ever military drill, Operation Talisman Sabre, involving 35,000 troops from 19 countries.
We're doing this to prepare for deterrence, to prepare for peace, as well as to prepare for operating with our other teammates, our allies.
In addition to a show of force, it's meant to strengthen how U.S. and allied forces work together, side by side, in complex air and amphibious missions.
When our adversaries see how easily we bring together all these nations, this many folks, and we operate in an extended exercise, they should see that we can quickly transmit that into combat.
The goal? Send a clear message to Beijing that any move on Taiwan won't go unanswered.
It's us saying to China, you're not just fighting Taiwan, you're not just fighting Taiwan in the United States, but you're fighting Taiwan, the United States, Japan, Australia. That China, you're a big country, but you're not going to be able to impose your will on Taiwan because the rest of us will counter you.
And in a historic move, the U.S. Army fired its new Typhoon missile system in the Western Pacific, striking a sea target and showing China the region is well within reach of U.S. precision firepower.
Deterrence is two things. It's, I have the capability to stop you, and you understand that I am willing to do it. That willingness to do it, that credible level of deterrence, comes from action, and that action is to be present.
A presence Montgomery says China has spent decades trying to prevent.
The Chinese have been spending aggressively over 30 years of constant investment and development in their forces with one aim, driving the United States out of the first and second island chains.
The U.S. has countered with an enlarged military footprint. 55,000 troops in Japan, 28,000 in South Korea, almost 6,500 in Guam, along with a new Marine base there, and expanding access in the Philippines, where new airfields and ports allow rapid response and stealth F-35 deployments.
What we're doing is trying to develop the Philippine ability to confront China in their and their air and maritime space.
All this comes as China pushes aggressive claims over nearly the entire South China Sea, including waters near the Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam.
The Chinese treat their neighbors as, vassal supplicant states. We're a big country, you're a small country, be quiet.
From Australia to Guam and the Philippines, the U.S. and its allies are drawing the line with a powerful display of a united front. As Talisman Sabre wraps up, Washington and its partners are hoping Beijing gets the message. George Thomas, CBN News.
Coming up, the move of God here in America is also taking place in prisons. We're going to bring you a look at a salvation service behind bars when we come back.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
The spiritual move across the country is making its way into prisons. That is according to the ministry God Behind Bars. Hundreds of men at East Mississippi Correctional Facility lined up in the gym to hear the testimony of a former gang member who found Christ. By the end of the two-day event, more than 100 incarcerated men gave their lives to Jesus, and at least 50 others took part in a spontaneous baptism. The ministry saying for 2 straight days, the prison gym was transformed into holy ground. Well, time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I want to leave you with this prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for forgiveness. It's freedom to try again. It's a call to not look back and a push to look ahead and press forward for the greater you have planned for me. To that prayer, may we all say amen and amen. And with that, let's commit to making this a thankful Thursday from start to finish. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. Both of them in both places all the time. Also, let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless.